I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing really good. Thanks for asking. Alexa, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, my name is Alexa. I am 21 years old and I'm from Germany, close to Hamburg.
Alexa, growing up, did you have an interest in monsters or cryptids like Sasquatch or the Loch Ness Monster?
No, absolutely not. I was pretty scared of the paranormal. I still am. Like ghosts and witches and demons, my worst nightmare.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. Do you have many werewolf legends around Germany to this day?
We do. We have a lot of werewolf legends.
With the type of forests you have around there being so dense and old growth the way they are, I'm sure you had plenty of them.
Yeah, we do. We do, actually. Well, there's this one legend of a boy who said he got a belt of Wilfer by the devil. And every time he put on that belt with the Wilfer, he changed into a wolf himself. So that was how the actual werewolf legend was created here in Germany. And that boy slaughtered very, very heavily. I think he murdered a lot of women, a few children, chickens, goats, and that's how this whole werewolf hysteria started here in Germany.
I think I've heard about that legend. That legend and the Beast of Jevadan.
Absolutely, and we have many other werewolf legends from the small villages around all these old German cities that were growing up around 1700, 1600 century, and there were many beliefs of werewolves when chickens and even when people disappeared. There was a big hysteria of werewolves throughout the centuries in and around Germany.
What gets me is, to this day, you still have so many old-growth forests and perfect places for something unknown like that to hide that it's just beyond belief.
We have, forests everywhere. You just walk out of the town and you're in a forest. And it's so thick you cannot see through the trees on both sides.
It is a beautiful place, though.
It is. Germany, actually everyone thinks Germany is such a horrible country with no beach and no sun, but it has its many, many advantages. We have a beautiful landscape with much meadow, with much trees, and we have a lot of lakes, and we do have beaches against everyone's disbelief.
Whether you have beaches or not, to me it's still a beautiful place, so you don't have to sell it to me.
I just wanted to clear it up because everyone says Germany has no beaches. That's not true. That's a lie.
No, I understand. Have you heard about anyone else in the area of your encounter having an encounter with a dog man?
No, absolutely not. There was not one person I've ever heard of who had an encounter like that. Never.
Really? Lucky you then, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Lucky me. It could have been someone else.
Yeah, unfortunately. Please tell us about the unique house where your encounter happened.
Well, my house, or my father's house, lies in the middle of nowhere. It's approximately 45 to 50 minutes from Hamburg and 30 minutes from the suburbs, like the Visaria lane of Hamburg. And my father got that house around 2000, let me think, 2010, 2009, around that time, when he laid down his CEO from his company and he wanted to remove himself from town and from the stress, and he bought that house. And when you look at it from the front, it's just a big cubicle of glass. You have to imagine it as just a one-floor house. Here in Germany, we call it bungalow. And it only has one big upper floor. It's just the entire house. There's no upper floor. There's one main floor and sometimes, in some cases, in these type of house, we have a cellar too. And in my case, we do have a cellar, but it's mostly for, storing furniture we don't need, and, a small guest bathroom and a small guest bed. So, yeah, it's not used very often. And when you enter the house, you just walk along a long path, and our house is pretty symmetrical. It's just like a big cube. And when you enter the house, you have a glass front next to the door. Very clever, if you ask me, but I did not build that house. And you walk inside, and you have the kitchen straight ahead of you, and to your left, adjoining, is the living room. And the living room has two big glass fronts. From one side to the other side, where it normally would be, normal stone walls, it's just glass. And so is the kitchen. The kitchen is very long, and the entire side of the kitchen, opposite to the counter, is just made of glass, just like the living room, and even a part of my workroom, of my home office, has an ongoing glass window. So everything is made of glass in that house. Even the bathroom, I think it's important for later, the bathroom has, just like my home office, this one big ongoing window on both sides.
I could see that being problematic.
It is.
I'll bet it is.
That's the big, advantage of the house. It's like in the middle of nowhere. It's literally nowhere. We have to drive by car about 20 minutes to get to the next gas station, and 30 minutes to get anywhere close to civilization. And all around the house, it's just meadow and forest. There's nothing else. There's no neighbor in shouting reach. You just cannot. You can open the door and you can scream for help as much as you want. The only person or the only thing that would answer you would be the fox saying, "Shut up, I want to sleep." So you can imagine it's pretty lonely.
That sounds like a really nice area, and the house sounds absolutely beautiful, but your memories of the place are always going to be tainted now because of that horrible experience you had.
I don't think so. I try to remove, the negativity of that slowly but surely, and I just, want to live in my home and feel comfortable and not being scared.
Because of how you look at things like that, that's just going to do nothing but help you get over this, so that's a great thing. By the way, Alexa, how close is the wood line to that house?
It's pretty far. I have to estimate it's about, I don't know, I would say the first front line of the forest is approximately half a football stadium. It's pretty far. It is, on both sides. From the side from the kitchen, that's very, very far. I cannot tell you in how many feet it's away, but the wood line of the living room is a little closer. But it's still pretty far away. I do take walks with my dogs across the meadows towards the front lines before that encounter, and it took me almost 1 hour to get to that front line.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty far.
It sure sounds like it. All right, Alexa, please tell us about your encounter. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
It was late December. My father has a brother who lives in London, and it's, a family tradition that my father and his girlfriend go visit my uncle over New Year's Eve every year since, I don't know how many years, but it's been a lot of years. And as always, they asked me to stay in the house and look over the dog and just watch out that nothing happens, so someone is there. Because you can just see from afar that the house is worth It's money, you can see it. We do have our cars parked in front of it, and just by that I think it's a paradise for every burglar. And so I agreed to stay over the week. We're there in London, my father and his girlfriend, and watch the dog, a German Shepherd, who's huge. He's huge, but it's just a sweetheart. The first 2 days were just normal. I was enjoying the free time. I was enjoying being alone, in the seclusion of the area. I like to be myself, to be on myself, actually, and I enjoy the quietness of that place. But the third day, when I took my dog out for a walk, and I opened the door, I immediately got that feeling that something wasn't right. I cannot explain that. I think it's a feeling you get when you know something is not okay. I just can describe it as, my gut telling me something is wrong. I had that feeling one time when my grandmother died, and I got exactly that feeling in the stomach. And I knew something wasn't right, and an hour later, my mother called, and she said my grandmother was dead. So I took my dog for a walk, and you have to imagine it's a long, long path, just surrounded by meadows and forest, and it goes on for miles. You can literally walk straight forward for 3 hours before you reach the next street. So it's pretty secluded. And while I was walking, I got that feeling that, it just got stronger, that something wasn't right. I had the urge to just turn around every time and look behind me. And my dog was acting completely normal. I just brushed it off as me being paranoid. And, normally I walk for hours. I can just put my headphones on and just walk straight for 1 or 2 hours. It's relaxing for me. But that day, I think I just walked 20 or 30 minutes before I just couldn't stand that feeling anymore, that something wasn't right. And I practically turned around on my heels, and I literally ran back home. And as soon as I reached my front door, I just bolted inside, and I shut the door. I actually locked it, which is very unusual for me, because normally when I'm there, I just leave it open. I even leave the key outside of the door, because who's going to come in at that area? So I'm normally just leaving the key outside. I know I have a huge dog inside that house, and every normal thinking person would not walk into a house where a 50-kilo German Shepherd sits on the opposite side of the door and looks at you and just barks at you, and the entire walls are shaking. No normal thinking person would walk into a house like that. So I just locked the door, which is very unusual, and I just left it as that. I did not open the front door until I had to go out to get firewood for the fireplace inside my living room. So that's the only time when I unlocked the door, jumped out, got the wood, and I jumped practically back in. I just left the door as it was, and I was trying to shake off the feeling of being uncomfortable, just thinking, I'm inside my house, everything is okay, no one's going to come in. I just let the evening pass by, watching TV. For everyone thinking this comes out of imagination, I am a huge scaredy cat. So I do not watch horror movies or psycho thrillers or whatever comes into mind when I'm home alone. I do not watch these movies because I get really bad nightmares from that. I just leave my fingers from that. And I was watching my favorite TV show, which is Gossip Girl, so no one can think I'm watching, Hannibal or something. I was getting thirsty. I walked into the kitchen. got a glass out of the cupboard and opened the fridge and got a bottle of water out of it. My dog was just sleeping on his basket, snoring in peace. So everything was fine, everything was quiet. And you have to imagine that around the house there are not many lights. We have one or two, I don't know if you have these things in America, it's just, they're small solar light. And it's just charged by sunlight. And it just illuminates the area just a little with the light stored over the day. We have one or two of these small solar lights in our garden. So there are just two tiny spots illuminated by that. And it's just, such a pale light. You can just imagine it as very, very weak moonlight. So it does not help anything. And on my terrace, which is in front of the kitchen, there are two sliding doors, so we can exit through the kitchen onto the terrace. And the terrace had two small lights I always turn on in the evening when it gets dark outside. And they're very weak. These are not like huge floodlights. Absolutely not. These are normal lights you put outside of a house wall. So they just illuminated the terrace, nothing more. I just was about to fill in the glass with water, and, suddenly I heard a sound behind me, and my dog was standing. He just jumped from his sleep, and he just stared outside of the window. He just pressed his nose against the glass. And he was staring right out into the darkness. And I was just thinking, I just brushed it off, thinking, oh, it's a deer. He hates deer. And I just said, oh, lay down again. You're being stupid. And he just didn't move. And I noticed that he started to raise his fur. And that's very unlikely for him because he's, as I already mentioned, he may be big, but he's a gentle giant. And he starts to growl and he starts to bark. And it was close to 12 or 11 p.m. So I was not in any mood for any ruckus. And I was like, oh, shut up. You're being stupid. Just lay down. It's a deer. It's nothing. Shut up. But he did not shut up. And I was even more concerned when he started to completely act out of character. He started to jump against the window doors. And I was like, are you nuts? Stop that. What are you doing? And that was the moment it just crossed my mind. Oh no, there's someone out there. And I am alone inside this house. Great. My biggest nightmare has come to life. But I was still, screaming at my dog. Well, not screaming, but commanding him to stop because it was really obnoxious right then. I looked out of the window and I saw something moving in the dark. It just moved outside of the radius that the light illuminated. I could see something moving, but I couldn't see what. But then, against the dark, I remember that so clearly because the little small last pieces of light from the terrace lights just illuminated the outside of the silhouette. And I thought, it's huge. That was the first thing I noticed. I couldn't see what it was. I didn't know what it was, but I could see that it was huge. I saw broad shoulders, and I could see the upper torso. The next thing is just like a scene from a horror movie. And I could see a big thigh, just standing out against the light because he moved that thigh into the light. The thigh was the first thing I saw. And I was thinking, what is that? And then I saw the second thigh, and then it moved entirely into the light. And I think everything froze. Everything was just stopping. I couldn't move, I couldn't think, I couldn't breathe. I just could stare. And that thing was out of anything possible. I don't know how to describe how I felt at that moment. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel panic. I was just frozen. I think my brain, I heard that your brain compares something that you never saw before with something that you have already seen before. And the only thing I could think at that moment was werewolf. That was the only thing I could compare that thing with. As it stepped into the light, my dog was still freaking out, and I was standing there completely in shock. I wasn't moving. I was just looking at it. And it was just so scary. It was, in hindsight, I don't know how I managed not to, faint or run away or scream. I still don't know how I did that. I just stared at it. And the head, I just can tell you that the head just grazed the roof of my terrace. So it was huge. You have to see, I am 5'2", so I'm tiny. I'm really tiny. And that thing was, I would say you can put myself on my shoulders and have my double height, and that thing would have still been 1.5 head taller than me. And, just the face. I don't know if I can call it face. This was not a human face. Even though the body resembled human, the face did not. And the body did not. I don't know what to say or how to describe that, but it was just huge, and it was just horrible. It was a nightmare. And it took a step towards the glass. And that was probably the moment I started to freak out. I grabbed my dog on its tail. I know it's not very gentle, but I pulled him back on his fur, on his legs, on his tail. I just grabbed him, and I just stood there and knelt over with my dog, and that thing stood in front of my terrace door. Just a glass door, not bulletproofed or anything, just a normal glass door separating me from a thing that, in my opinion, did not exist until that second, until that moment. And it just looked at me, and I was looking at it, and it just lifted its hands, and that is just, the only thing I could compare to that is a raccoon. Raccoons have these tiny little fingers, just that it had so much longer fingers and very thick, very broad fingers. Fingers you would normally see on a man working very hard. And that was the moment I thought, I'm done. I'm done. I just got to my knees next to my dog, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to die. And I freaked out. I just freaked out, and I just screamed at it. I just said, I yell, "Get out! Leave me alone! Just go away!" I was yelling every profanity at it that I could think of. And I was just screaming and yelling, and oh my God, it was just such a ruckus because my dog was still freaking out. But that thing did not even flinch at that. It was just staring at me with its eyes fixated on me. And it lifted his hand, and, you know, I'm saying he because I had the very distinctive feeling that it was a male. So I don't know if I have to say it or he. I don't know if it was a he, but for me it felt like a male. And, you know, it just lifted his hand, and with one claw, I remember that claw really well because it was just branded into my memory, that sound of the claw against the window. And it was not, you know, turned or round like that of a cat or a dog. It was more straight, but still it had, you know, a small curl to its end. So it was like a rose thorn. You can imagine, just a very, very, very big and very sharp. And it just tapped against the window. It was the most, I cannot tell you how terrifying for me that was, because, you know, such a movement is just, that's human. I do not know any animal who would tap against a window with one claw. I do not know one single animal. And just the face, it was just, you know, while it tapped against the window, and you have to remember that it was now in the full broad light, just not broad, but it was enough for me to see very good, for me to get a clear image. The face, I just saw the lips moving up. I could see the wrinkles forming on the nose, you know, like when a dog starts to growl. I could see the wrinkles forming on its nose while it tapped against the window. It was just so horrible. It was the most horrible thing I've ever seen. And I've seen one or two pretty bad things over my life. And nothing could compare to that. Nothing. I think, you know, there will be in the future nothing that compares to that. Never ever will anything compare to that. And, you know, it just, I have the feeling that it was, I don't know, that it was growling, snarling. I didn't hear anything. I was just screaming, you know, over my screaming and over the barking. I'm surprised I heard, you know, the tapping. It's just probably, you know, a sound that just branded into my memory that just stands out because I just remember it so clearly. And while it pulled up its lips like a dog would, and his eyes were just still fixated on me. I don't know how to explain that, but I had this horrible feeling that I had to get closer. It's just, you know, it's a horrible, horrible, you know, it was a horrible feeling. It was like driving by an accident and you know you shouldn't look. You're just driving by the car wreck and you know you shouldn't look, and you know you shouldn't stop or watch or do anything, come closer to it, but you cannot help because you want to know what happened. I know it's a very bad example. I know it's very, very. I think it's a bad example, but that's the only thing I could ever compare to it. This feeling. I had the feeling, when we locked eyes, that it was almost, for me, it was almost in my head. It was like I heard, or more I had the feeling, I don't really know how to say that. I just had the feeling that it was like luring me in. And that was a horrible feeling because I couldn't help myself. I just wanted to get closer. And, my common sense just screamed at me, don't get closer. Don't do that. Don't get any closer to that thing. It's going to kill you. It's going to murder you. But, that other thing, that need to get closer to that thing, it was just there, and it was so hard to fight against it. It was real battle for me to stay right next to my dog. I held onto his fur almost as an anchor to not go to that thing. I wanted to, actually, you have to imagine that. I wanted to put my hand against the glass just to get closer, and I was, at the same time, for me it was almost hypnotic. And I just could pull myself out of that feeling, out of that loop long enough to always tell myself, don't get closer. Don't do that. Never do that. Just stay where you are. And I was still yelling, I was still screaming. I was still saying, get away from me. Get out of here. I don't want you here. And I thought, I'm done. I'm really done for. Because that thing, as huge as it was, it could have easily broken the glass. It could have jumped right through it. And, it was still tapping as if to tell me, you stupid girl, there's just nothing that can stop me from getting you. It was almost like I had these words in my head of him telling me there's nothing that's going to stop me to get you if I wanted to. It almost had something mocking the way it did, and that was so shocking for me, now in hindsight, because I did not think that exact thought at the moment it was happening, but now, reminiscing the encounter, I had the feeling that it was mocking, as it was saying, I am the predator, and you the prey, and you should know your place, and I could get you any time I wanted you. And I was just kneeling on the floor, and I was thinking, get away from me. And I'm not I don't know how I should say that, but I'm not a big believer. I'm not Christian or Catholic or anything. I respect every religion. I have no doubts that there's something that, I don't know how to say that. I believe in good and bad. I believe things happen out of a purpose. I think good things always come with bad things. That is my believing. I do not say I do not believe in God. I just say I don't know if I believe in God, but I believe in something. And I never prayed before because I think it's just wrong for someone to pray who is not a real believer or, a strong believer. And at that moment, it was the first time in my life I was praying. I was just praying, dear God, please don't let me die this way. Not this way. Just make him leave. I want to live. And I have the feeling that it was laughing. You know, I could practically hear inside of my head that rumbling in that huge chest, and it was such a horrible feeling. I don't know if it was my imagination at that time, or if it was really, if these things are capable of, you know, laughing at someone. But I have the feeling that it was laughing at me because I was praying. And, you know, the next thing I see is that it just turned, you know, it just gave me one last look. When I think, you know, in hindsight, I think he got bored with me, not running away. And he just turned to his side so I could see the side of his back. And it was just as muscled as the front. I could see the tendons of muscles under the fur when it moved. And it just left the claw on my window. And it walked down the side of the house and dragged the claw along the glass. And it was such a horrible feeling. It was not only the feeling I got from the sound, but the sound will always stay in my mind. You know, do you remember these kids who were just such brats, who dragged their fingernails down the blackboard just to, you know, anger the other kids in the class? It was just exactly that sound. And it moved slowly out of the light of my terrace. But just before it completely melted back into the darkness of the night, it just stopped and looked over its shoulder just like a human would, which I found was such a horrible movement because it just looked so natural on him that I had the feeling that it did not look at a human over his shoulder only at that time. It just looked so natural. It just looked so fluent in that movement. And it gave me one last long stare. And it just looked at me, and I swear until today that he narrowed his eyes. And I had, you know, once again, I had this feeling that it, you know, was thinking like, I'll come back for you. It was just what I had, you know, what it just read out of that gaze, out of the glare it threw to me. And it felt like, I'll come back for you. There's no need to run. I'll come back for you. I'll get you. And then it turned around and just vanished into the darkness, which was just terrifying. You know, that was the moment I started to feel panic. And I started to get really, really scared. You know, my dog was still freaking out, and I was just clamping my hands over his muzzle to shut him up, to hear anything, any sound, or if I would hear tapping against the window once again, also scratching. You have to remember that it moved down towards my living room, which is just like my kitchen, made of glass. And I was thinking, okay, It's going to come through the living room, and it's going to get me, and it's toying with me. It's making me feel safe, and then it's going to get me. It's just going to come through the window, and then I'm done. And I waited, and I waited, and I listened. And I just tried to listen to everything. And I don't know how long I sat there, how long I've been in the kitchen, but it must have been a time. I think it must have been good 10, 15 minutes. And I was sitting there, and I was just, my mind was racing what I could do. My house is not made for getting into height. It's just not made for that. Everything is made of glass. You cannot hide in that house. And I thought, should I go into the bathroom? But there is a window. Even though I could pull down the blinds, it's just a paper blind. You can see through that. And if I'm correct, at that moment, that thing has eyes like an animal, and it can see in the dark. And I was thinking, it doesn't matter if I have these paper blinds down. These are really made of paper. So it's not any shield. It's just, a little blended, so you cannot see if someone is naked inside, to just cover it up. And I was thinking, I cannot hide in the bathroom. The doors in the house beside of the glass doors and the front door, they're made of wood. And I was thinking, that thing, it can come through the glass, and it can tear down the door with just a blink of its eye. And I would have no chance of running out of the bathroom once it cornered me there. That was just, at the moment, I don't know how I managed to, but that was just logical thinking. At that moment, I was trying to think of every possibility to get out of the house and alive. And for me, it was the most logical thing at that moment to stay in the kitchen. And my car keys were just an arm's reach away from me on the kitchen counter. And my front door just another 2 feet from me at that moment. And my car, I drive a very big car. It's a very big SUV by VW. And, we have a small gate at the start of our property. And my father had to remove a part of the gate so I could fit my car through there. So you can imagine it's pretty big. It's pretty broad. And I don't like to park it in the carport because it's very narrow, together with the cars of my father and the Audi of my father's girlfriend. And I just don't like to park there because it's just so crowded, and I'm always scared of driving against the cars. So I normally drive up to the front door so I can just drive down in a straight path through the gate. And I did just that. I parked my car at the morning when I came home from grocery shopping. I parked my car in front of the door so I didn't have to run with the groceries all over the place. So I was thinking, I have 2 feet left until I'm in my car, and I can drive straight down. I can escape that way. I can. And if that thing comes, I can jump into my car, I can just steer out of there, and I'm gone. So it was just like weighing, I was just, thinking, which way would be better? Of how can I survive? Or is that, let me put it another way, if that thing really does come after me, or inside my home, how can I survive the most? And I was thinking it was the best way to stay exactly there. And I was still waiting, and, my dog was a little calmer now. Was still growling, and it was still, he had his ears all over the place, and I think he was looking for, hearing for that thing. And that was the moment I just grabbed my car keys, ran to the front door, just quickly looked. You have to remember there is a glass door. There's a glass front right next to the front door. I just took a quick look outside. I opened the front door. I just practically reeled down the 2 steps, opened the car door, and let my dog jump in. I slammed the door shut behind me, and I stared out of there. My tires were reeling through, and I was speeding down my gateway and down onto the street. And here in Germany, we have a speed limit, and that's 62 miles per hour on county roads. I think I was, I don't know how many miles I was too fast, but I was just steering down that street. I was really racing. I was going by 93 miles per hour, where only 62 miles were allowed. I did not dare to look into my rear mirror. I tried not to, but I did. I always constantly looked into the rear mirror, and I tried to see if it was there or if not. I was trying to calm myself down, saying this thing could not hold up with a car going almost 94 miles per hour. So I just reeled out of there into town. I'm living on my own in a 2-floor apartment in the suburb of Hamburg, and I felt safer. I felt better as soon as I saw my house. I don't know. It's in the contract it says apartment. I say it's a house because it has 2 floors. And I took out the dog. I ran inside. I let down every blind I had. I have. It's just. I think it's just bad luck at that moment. I have glass doors all over the place. So I let every single electronical blind down I had, and I just sat down for a second. I grabbed my landline, and I just called my best friend. I think it was the middle of the night. It was almost 12:30. I think I estimated it was almost 12:30, going to 1 o'clock. And I was just calling my best friend, and she just picked up the call, and she was like, hello? So she was in deep slumber, and I just babbled. I was just like, oh my God, it's just so weird. I don't know what to do. I'm home. I need help. I was just crying on the phone. And I don't know if I said any current sentence that she understood, but I just heard, the rustling of blankets, and then she just said, I'm there in 20 minutes. And she was there in 20 minutes, still in her PGs and everything, but she was there. I told her everything that happened, and she did not doubt me. She just listened, and she made me a cup of tea so I could calm down, because I didn't notice, but I was just shaking. I was shaking from head to toe. I couldn't even hold the cup still while I was drinking. And, she said, we'll go to sleep now. Everything is okay. We're safe in here. You're going to rest now, or you're going to faint. And tomorrow we're going to your house, we're going to look. And I was just immediately that, no, I don't want to go there. Maybe it's still there. Maybe it just waits for me. And she was like, if I have any bad feeling about this, we're going to turn around immediately. Just to say that, my best friend, I don't know how to say that, but for me, she has something like an empath. She is very talented in feeling certain things. We do not believe in the paranormal, like ghosts and everything. We're not some crazy chicks who go out on the weekends to hunt for ghosts or something like that. We're not doing that. We're not into those things. We just say there's something beyond human understanding, and we're okay with that, but we don't need to know. And she just feels things. You can come into a room and she can tell you you're sad or you're angry or you're whatever, even though you're just very neutral in the face. You just don't give anything away, and she can tell you, pinpoint what you're feeling right now. We had an incident when we were in Madrid together. We booked a hotel room, and she came into the room, and she got pale as a sheet, and she said, something really bad happened in here. Later, we asked one of the housemates, and she said, yes, a husband murdered his wife in that room. And my best friend could tell that. She said she didn't know what happened. She just knew something bad happened. And I trust her. I trust her completely. And if she says it's okay, and if she says the air is clear, then it's clear. For me, it is. We went to sleep. I did not get any sleep that night. And later, the next morning, we drove over to her house, and she had a thing for old daggers. She gets them from everywhere, from antique stores, from the internet. She just, she likes to collect them, and she has a huge cupboard where all these beautiful daggers are. I said, we cannot go there. I was still very, very frightened of going back. And she said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to drive over to my house. We're going to get a dagger, and then we're going to drive over to your house, and we're going to look. So we drove to her house, got a few daggers, or more she, because I cannot handle these things. But she goes to a special training course to handle them so she does not hurt herself or hurt others with them. And I felt much safer, even though it was just a tiny little knife, nothing more than a pocket knife. And we drove over to my house, or to my father's house, and got out of the car, and I felt the shift in the air just like she did. She did not feel what I felt the other day when it happened, but I felt that something was different. This eerie feeling, this feeling in my gut that told me something was not right, was gone. It just felt normal. And she looked at me and she said, it's okay. It's no longer here. And I noticed something else. The day before, I did not notice, but something for me felt wrong because I noticed there were no sounds. Even in winter, the birds are making small sounds, not like in spring when they're on full-blown, volume, but they do make sounds. And that was completely gone. And now I heard a few birds here and there chirping. We looked around the property and we tried to find any tracks or any signs, but we found nothing because here in Germany you cannot imagine winter as a winter with snow and huge white mountains of fresh fluffy snow. Here in Germany it means fog, it means snow rain, and it means rain. So every track there would have been, the night before was gone with the rain. You know, the grass was flattened down by the strong rain over the night, and there was nothing we could have found. There was no sign it ever happened. You know, and for a quick second, I just questioned myself if I just imagined it. But I told myself, no, you did not. You did not imagine that. It really happened. And we walked inside, and at first I didn't want to stay, but she convinced me to stay just to see if there was anything going to happen. Now I have to agree with her. I could have not let my father live in a house knowing that something like that is around. I could have not. I did not care if he would have declared me as absolutely insane or anything. I would have not let him, live in a house with something so dangerous around. And she convinced me to stay just because of that, to see if something happens again, if we get a bad feeling again. And she said, as soon as we get a bad feeling, we're out. We're going to just drive, and we're not going to wait for what happens. We're just going to drive. But everything was okay. Nothing happened. My best friend stayed with me over the last days until my father returned. And as soon as my dad got back, I told him, Daddy, there was a burglar here. He was walking around the house. I was shouting at him, and I told him to go away, but he didn't. And he told me that he would get, electrical blinds, like I do have at my apartment, at my house. And I think 1 or 2 weeks after I told my dad that there was the burglar, aka my worst nightmare, the electrical blinds were on. There was a technician who installed them for us, and yeah, that's how it all went down.
The first time you recounted that experience for me, you were so much more shaken than you are now. I could hear it in your voice clearly that it's still really hard for you to talk about what happened to you that night, but it's obviously a lot easier for you to talk about that experience now than it was the first time you shared it in the pre-interview. So it does sound to me like at least you're making progress on dealing with this.
It helped a lot. When I said I would want to come on the show, I wanted for myself to close that experience. I wanted to just finish with that. I wanted to leave it behind. I wanted to get over it myself, but most and for all, I wanted other people to know that these things are not only in America where we hear most of the reports, they're everywhere. And I would have felt guilty if I heard one day from someone who disappeared while hiking or whatever here in Germany, and maybe not knowing that it was maybe a different cause. And I would have felt guilty, and I want people to know that these things are existing here too, so that they can watch out, that they are more aware of their surroundings. And the first time we talked, it was the actual first time I was living that experience again. So for me, I talked to my best friend. I told her what happened, but I did not get in detail. I told her there was a werewolf or whatever it was. I saw it and I ran. Those were the outlines of the talk and nothing more. Talking to you the very first time, it was horrible for me because it was the first time I lived that experience once again. But now, after I had, these feelings coming back, I can focus on the details, and that was important to me. I wanted to leave all the terror behind. I knew that would come the first time when I talk about it, because today I wanted to focus on the details. That was important to me, and I think I did a good job for myself. I tried to stay pretty focused, just as I told you. I wanted to stay focused. I wanted to stay objective about it and not get too carried away by these emotions, because for me it would only mean that whatever that thing was would have gotten the upper hand once again over my life. And I refuse that. I refuse to let the dark thing snuff out my light. I don't want to. I hear so many people are affected many, many years after these encounters, and I don't want that. I said to myself, I relive it once again, and then I'm going to close with it. And that's what I want, and that's how I try to handle the thing, because I always say to myself, there are dark things on the road. There are always getting obstacles thrown in your way, but you can never let yourself be dragged down by that, and you have to keep on going and get over these obstacles. I know it's hard, and I know it for myself, not only because of this encounter, but before of these I had 2 very bad accidents, and everyone told me, you're never going to live the way you've been before, and you have to get adjusted to the fact that you're no longer going to live the way you did before. And both times I refused that. I refused to just let it lay over me and, get an upper hand of the life I live, and I want to live it my way and not the way anything or anyone dictates for me. And just like that, it's with this encounter for me.
It's probably never going to be easy for you to deal with what happened to you that night, but because of that great personality you've got, it's going to be a lot easier for you than, say, someone else to get over what happened that night and get to the point where you can deal with it in a healthy way. So that does say a lot about your character, and the fact that you have such an interest in coming forward and sharing what happened to you with the public to hopefully prevent someone else having to go through something like that. That too says a lot about you and that amazing character you've got. I'm really impressed.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, it's true. That's how it is. Speaking of that friend you just mentioned, she sounds like an amazing friend.
She is. She's the best. She, just like many things in my life, I had a very big down spiral when I met her. I was fighting an eating disorder when I met her, and I was just overall a horrible person. It was a mess. I was moody, I was unfair, I was just a bad person at that point of my life, because I was just so, I was just so unhappy with myself. And she was like my rock. And she pulled me today, I can just say that I would have never been at this point where I am today with the way I see things. I would have never come to that without her. I would have drowned, just to say it in that picture. I would have just literally drowned in my sorrow, in my despair, and I don't think I would have ever become this person if my best friend would have not pulled me out of the water. And, we had so many things happening, just like with these 2 accidents happening to me. I broke my shoulder in a very bad way. I broke 4 vertebrae in an accident. So I had pretty severe injuries, and so many people, my doctors, my family, my relatives, they were all like, oh, now you have to adjust, and you can never, you cannot do this, and you cannot do that. How are you doing this? And I was once again at this point where I didn't know what to do, if I can pull through this. And, my best friend always stood at my side, and she taught me to live my life the way I want to. And the way I handle things today it's just because of her, because she taught me so much about life and perspective and how your way of seeing things can change your life for the better. And that was also a point for me, because I hear so many people are traumatized by this. And I am really, really sorry for these people. I truly feel for them. And that is just another reason for me to keep going, to keep being myself and keep fighting, against this, this darkness, this thing brought over my life once again. And I want people who have the same thing, who are going through the same thing, I want them to know you can get over this and you can see it in another way. You can live your life the way you did before without this shadow being cast over your light. That is something that was so important for me, because every time I hear a person who says he's affected for 10, 20, 30, or even 40 years, I suffer. I suffer really with them. I do feel with them, and I'm so sorry for these people.
I'm not surprised you feel that way, considering how nice and genuine of a person you are. I'm wondering, Alexa, you told us how you told your dad there was a burglar on the property that night. Did you ever come clean and tell him about what you really saw that night?
No, I did not. I'm still fighting myself today if I should tell him, because I know he would... I don't think he would believe me, because, my father is a very straight person. There's only white and there's only black. There's no gray. And my father would tell me it's nonsense, and he would tell me I'm dreaming, and I'm still fighting with myself if I should tell him, because, it's just an internal fight, because on the one hand I think, what if that thing comes back? But on the other hand, it's been almost 6 months since it happened, and my dad didn't tell me that something was strange. His girlfriend didn't notice, and everything is normal. So I just hope I had the baddest luck in the universe, and I was there when it came across the house, and I hope it's moved on for good. I'm still undecided if I should tell him, but I think for myself, if the time is right and I have a quiet minute to tell him, I would, if he said that something was going on the property.
My advice on that situation, Alexa, is if you do find a time that for you is right to sit down with him and share this experience, I highly recommend that you do. A little bit for him, but mostly for yourself. If something does happen to him down the road because it does come back for whatever reason, I don't think you're going to be able to forgive yourself if you didn't come forward and at least try to let him know about what you saw that night.
I'll try, because it's hard, because my dad is that type of person. You tell him the truth about something like that, and he looks you dead in the eye and he will say to you, stop the nonsense. He's just that kind of person. Just like I said, for him it's just black and white. There's nothing in between. So I think one day when I feel the time is right, I will tell him, but until then, I will think about the right way to tell him.
Oh no, I understand and I can appreciate that, but Understand, Alexa, whether he believes you or not, that's not all that important here. If he does look you dead in the eye when you tell him about what happened to you that night, and if he tells you that it's all nonsense, is it nonsense? Is what you're telling him about that you saw, is it nonsense? Did you or didn't you see what you say you saw that night?
For him, it would be, you dreamed. For me, it would be, please believe me. And I think what would be the worst for me is when I tell him what happened and he just brushes it off. That would be the most terrible thing for me. So I'm trying to find the right words and for me the right time to actually tell him.
Oh no, I can appreciate that, and I do think that's the right way to go about it. I do hope you change the way you look at all this, though. If you do share this information with him, I hope you see it as a take it or leave it situation. Knowing him the way you do, if you tell me that you're almost positive he's going to look at you and tell you that it's nonsense, I've got pretty much no doubts that that's what's going to happen, no matter what you do. But you have armed him with that info. It's up to him to do whatever he decides to do with that information. If he wants to brush it offhand as nonsense, that's up to him. He can do that if he wants to, but at least you tried to arm him with that info. If sometime down the road, like I was saying, something does happen to him, if that dog man does happen to come back and do something to him, unfortunately, I know without a doubt from having talked to you that you would be so beside yourself with guilt. Whereas if you did come forward and at least try to warn him if something down the road happens to him because that dog man does come back, then at least you'll know, hey, I tried. I tried to warn him. He didn't believe me, so I did my best. Unfortunately, this still happened. You know yourself better than anyone else, so whatever you decide to do is going to be the right decision. I just wanted to share with you my opinion on how I would recommend handling that situation. That's all this is. Moving on, when it dragged its claw across the glass as it moved towards the living room, did it wind up gouging the glass, or the next day when you took a look, were there no marks?
No, there was no mark. I looked at each glass together with my best friend, and we found no mark. Nothing. And that makes me this is just making it so scary for me, because, you know, I could make my own picture about that thing, and for me, it was dangerously intelligent. It just, for me, it was intelligent, and there was intelligence beyond animal understanding. And it's just, it can be myself, but I say that it did not leave a mark intentionally. I say it dragged its claw across the window just to make its point clear, but it didn't want to leave a mark. I'm very sure of that, because I think if it wanted to leave a mark, it could have. But just like the dragging, the tapping against the window was just as light as the dragging. It was just the sound that just clearly branded my mind.
They're the masters of intimidation. I think you're right on the money. That's all it wanted to do that night, was just intimidate you there, and apparently it was really good at doing that. I can understand why you would be so strongly affected by what it did that night. Anyone would have been.
Yeah, I think is that he just came across this huge area thinking, oh, that's a great place. I'm all by myself, good hunting ground, no one is here to disturb me. And then there's this one house, full of light, every light is on, there are cars, there's noise coming from inside. I want them to be gone as long as I'm here. That is what I made of that encounter. I think it was just passing by, saying, I'm here, don't you dare come out. I don't want you nowhere near my hunting grounds. Do you understand me? For me, it was more, now in hindsight, looking how it all went down, for me, it was just a clear message, stay where you are, don't get in my way, and we don't have a problem. You know, thinking about that, it could have waited for me as soon as I got out of the door. It could have jumped in front of my car. It could have knocked my car right over, just how tall and how strong it looked. It could have just, I believe it could have just grabbed my car and threw to the side, making every way of escaping impossible, but it didn't. It left me alone. So I had some time to think about it, to clear my mind about it. I think it was just a message, stay out of my way. Just don't get into my business or I'll come for you.
I think you're probably right on the money about its intentions. It showed up just wanting to intimidate you. It saw that it had done that, mission accomplished, so it just decided to move on. As it was standing there looking through that window at you from such a close distance, of course it afforded you a really good chance to get a good look at this thing. Let's talk about its appearance now. Tell us about its face. What kind of features did you notice when you were standing there looking at this thing?
Well, the first thing I noticed was how broad his head was. I've had dogs all of my life. I have had German Shepherds all of my life. And it leads me to the conclusion, I think it was male because of its entire stature. It was just over and over, every part of it was huge. From head to toe, everything was just overly large and broad. The head was very broad. It had a very broad forehead. Very long ears. It reminded me of my German Shepherd's ears, but very large. And the muzzle was just enormous. I would say it was from the fingertip of my middle finger down to my elbow. It had a huge muscle. What I remember really clearly were the teeth. You know, I told you in the first interview that I could see the teeth perfectly because at the entire time it looked at me, it had its lips pulled up. And like a dog, it had fangs, very large and very long, but unlike a dog tooth, you know, a dog tooth is very blunt at the tip, but these things that were in its mouth were just so sharp. The tips were just as sharp as the tip of a knife. That is what I remember the most, that I thought, oh dear, I'm done. I'm really done. If that thing grabs me with those teeth, I'm no longer here. And what was so scary about it was that it was black. It had jet black fur. There was not one single white hair I could see in the dim light. It was just overall black. And the eyes were probably the worst thing about it. They were, I don't really know, do you know the movie Underworld, the Underworld series?
I do.
The sequence when Lucian is in the elevator and he still has this human form and he just pushes these silver bullets out of his skin. It's just a very ugly scene. But he has these very awkward lichen eyes in the movie, these pale bluish gray eyes. It was exactly that color, maybe a little lighter, but what I thought was so awkward about it, that it was for me like it were almost as if the eyes were luminescent from the inside. Not from the light from my terrace, but I had the feeling that we're glowing from the inside. And I have the feeling that this thing, when it looked at me, it felt like it sucked the soul right out of my body. As if it was looking at me, and it was like there was, a hook on my soul, and it was pulling and pulling and pulling. And I felt completely drained when I felt like every energy has left my body.
Oh, I could understand you feeling that way when you're standing there looking at something like that. How much of its legs did you see?
I saw most of the thighs, and what I thought was very awkward were that it had very muscled thighs, really, really muscled, really thick, and very and human. It was a human thigh you would see on a normal human being. Very thick, very broad, very muscled. But what I thought was awkward was that the knees were bent backwards, like a dog's leg. And what I noticed was that his lower leg from down the knee were much, much thinner than the upper thighs. The upper thighs were huge, but his lower thigh, down below, from the knee below, was a good hand smaller than the upper thighs. And it just looked shaky. It just looked as it was not, as it was an Arnold Schwarzenegger body put on to a 6-year-old children's legs. It just didn't look right for me, now looking at my memory as the picture I have in my head still from the encounter, from what I remember. It just didn't fit. He had this huge muscular body. I swear to you, if you would have shorn off that fur, you could have seen a perfect six-pack. A perfect six-pack, the epidural muscles, everything. It would have been clearly drawn against the skin. The chest muscles, biceps, triceps, everything. Even the shoulders and neck were muscled as much as I could see. But the lower legs, the legs below the knee, there was no muscle. It just looked like skin and bone.
That would be a classic canine-type dogman look for its legs there. Was there anything unusual about the way it walked?
Yeah, for me, the upper body looked completely comfortable the way it walked. But for me, it looked like, do you know these women who wear sky-high heels and who cannot walk on them? They're just wobbling from side to side with their ankles. It just looked like that for me. It was a huge upper body, muscled and fit and made for hunting and trapping and I don't know what else. And placed on very thin lower legs. And it just looked, I don't know how to describe it. For me, the upper body looked completely comfortable being upright. But the lower body, from its thighs downwards, it looked uncomfortable. It just looked like its upper body was made for standing up and its lower body was not.
That had to be a sight to see.
it was very, I don't know how to say that. Every time I try to describe this walk for myself, I do not find the correct words for it. Because you have to see to understand what I really mean. It's just, it looks very natural the way it moves, as if it is used to standing upright, but at the same time it looks as if it is uncomfortable on walking on two legs.
Through all this, did you ever get the impression it might not have been alone?
I cannot tell. I really don't know. I did not see the ears twitch on the head, so the entire time this whole thing happened, it looked at me. I did not have the feeling that there was something else with it, or if there were more of them. I cannot tell. It was way too dark to tell if there was something moving in the shadows. I don't know. And if there would have been something in the forest, it would have been way too far to see. And even though it would have been on the meadow around the property, I still wouldn't be able to see it. So I really cannot tell if it was alone or not.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could understand that. After you had this experience, how much research did you put into Dogmen?
At first, I did really the old school fashion. I walked into the library. I felt really stupid asking for werewolf legend books or anything. The librarian looked at me like I was a little crazy. And it was just like, at that moment I said, it's for a project. It's just for a project. And, I walked into the library and I got a few books, but you will not find many books, about the legends we have here in Germany. So when I was not really satisfied with what I found in the library, I started to search on the internet, and I had a huge load of information, and of course, I did not really know what was right and, what was fiction and what was not. And I don't know if it was a stupid idea or the right idea at that moment. I was watching videos on YouTube. It was not like anything for, researching Dogman or something like that. It was just watching, normal videos. And I have the idea that maybe there are people who are posting these encounters they had, maybe with photos, these photo slideshows you have on YouTube and things like that. So I just typed in werewolf encounter, and I got a load of videos with stories from Reddit, the Reddit platform where people write the scary encounters and whatsoever. And in one comment section, I saw someone talking about your radio show. And I thought maybe I should just listen to it, because in the comment he wrote, yeah, Bekandes is doing a great show and it's very, very informative and he's talking to eyewitnesses. Maybe you should go have a look there. And I thought, okay, maybe I'm going to do that. And I did exactly that. So I just bumped onto your channel, and I think it took me 2 weeks to go through every episode.
So you binge listened?
Yeah, practically. At first I thought, okay, you're going to listen to 1 or 2 episodes, and if it's not what you've seen, or if it does not resemble it, you just can drop it and get other ideas from research. Maybe your best friend has an idea. But when I just heard the first episode, when I first listened to it, I was like, that's it. That's it. They maybe looked a little different, but the way it was described, how the eyewitness felt when it looked at the Dogman, how it looked, but more than for all, how the eyewitnesses felt. I could immediately tell that it was the same way I felt when I had that happened to me. So I listened for a very long time, and I made actually a pro and con list if I should not write to you. And I wrote the first time in May, but I deleted the whole thing because I didn't want to. I did not want people to think I'm crazy or maybe not believe me, because this is probably, one of the closest encounters I've ever heard about. And, I heard many people seeing Dogman through the window. So I was a little calmer after that, knowing that other people were just as much as I was face to face with a thing like that. So I felt a little better, and I wrote once again, and it took me an hour to send you the report. So that was actually how I found your channel. So over the comment section on YouTube, I found you.
Yeah, I'm so glad you did find me. I'm so glad, too, that you had the courage to come forward and share your experience. The fact that you're sharing it publicly the way you are, I've got no doubts that's going to help so much in your attempt to get over the effects of this encounter. And as you found out, a lot of these eyewitnesses who have these encounters, just like you did, they have experiences with dogmen looking through their windows at them. There's something about that that's just so creepy. It just makes it so much harder to get over an encounter like that when they do that.
Absolutely. For me it was like, I think I would have just brushed it off if it would have been, I don't know, if I would have sat on my terrace drinking coffee or, I don't know what, just looking out, enjoying the rain-free 5 minutes of the day, and looking over the field and seeing that thing. It would have been way, way easier for me than to just stand face to face with that thing, I think.
I'm sure that's how it would have been. It's so easy, though, to sit there and look back at what happened and second-guess yourself, so I'd try not to do too much of that if I were you. Have you heard about any other people in that area since or before that experience you had having an encounter with the dog man?
No. Never. No one I know. I don't know if I can, just walk to my neighbors. We have the hunter living like 20 minutes from us. I don't know if I should just walk up to him and ask him, do you know if there's old legends about this place? It would have been, everyone knows me there because it's such a small community and everyone knows each other, and I'm just like thinking, me walking up to my neighbors and asking them if they would know about something like that, they would think I'm insane. Here in Germany, people are very secretive about it. When something to them happens, they just barely talk about it. Up here in the north, we just say, it's an old saying in German, I'm going to say it in German, nur die Harten kommen in den Garten. It just means only those with a thick fur are going to survive. That's the mentality we have here in the northern areas, so you will find hardly any person who would talk about anything that happened in their lives. There's nothing on the internet. I try to find it, but there's nothing documented. Never. We had last summer, unfortunately, our mailman drowned in our lake, but unless that, no one died in our village. No one. So it's hard to get any information if there would have been an encounter or not.
Other than that experience you had that night, it sounds like a great place to live to me.
It is. It's very beautiful. Despite what happened, it's just a beautiful place. First and for all, you have this absolute peace. There are no cars beside those of those who live there. you have just the birds around you, you have just the meadows around you, there's no disturbance, and they're very well kept properties, very nice houses. You know, it's just a place where those live who said they wanted to retire from the fast life of the city and who put great effort in, you know, decorating their gardens and their houses. And just when you drive through, you have very big properties, yes, but when you drive through the small, you know, the small village, it's just very beautiful houses, roses everywhere, and very well kept grass and front gardens, and just overall it's just a beautiful place to live.
It sure sounds like it to me. Well, it's about time for us to get out of here, Alexa. Before we do that, though, I need to ask you, is there anything that you've taken away from this experience you could consider to be a positive thing?
I do. Not that I think this encounter was positive, but I learned once again that there's nothing that could actually tear you down. If you really want to be yourself and live the way you are, you can. And that's what I learned out of this encounter. Broken bones heal. That's what I learned the first time, but, you know, things like these that leave emotional scars, that are so much harder to overcome. And I learned from this experience that it takes time, but if you really want to, and if you really say to yourself, I want to live my life the way I want to, you can. And that you're stronger than you always think you are.
Very well said. I don't think you could be more right about that. Well, Alexa, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show tonight and telling us about your experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I just wish you didn't have to go through that experience in the first place. Well, have yourself a great night.
You too, Vic, and thank you for the great conversation, and thank you once again for helping me the way you did.
Oh, you know you're welcome. I just wish I could do more.
You already did enough. You did more than I think you know.
Well, that's really good news. Well, thanks again so much, Alexa. Have a great night, and I'll talk to you later.
Absolutely, Vic. You too. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.